Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce Karasik, co-founder of the Jewish Republican Alliance. Thank you for joining us today for another special edition of JRA Loudspeaker. What you just heard was President Trump from a little over 2 years ago, but failed leadership in the Democrats in the House, in the Senate, in the presidency for the last 2 years have caused so many problems for our beloved country. But Republicans and conservatives are finally being validated as the truth is starting to come out on so many issues that conservatives have been warning our citizens about for so long. But as Dennis Prager has always said, being on the left means never having to say, I'm sorry. When President Trump was in office, he alerted the country about crime and drugs pouring across our southern border and wanting to do something about it. Build a wall and seal off the border, he said. Democrats, the White House press corps, the mainstream media, all called him a racist, a xenophobe for trying to protect Americans and speaking the truth. But this week, Attorney General Merrick Garland said that the American fentanyl crisis was unleashed by the Mexican drug cartels on purpose. He's right. Over 100,000 people a year are dying from fentanyl drug poisoning. So sad. It could have largely been avoided and prevented if they listened to President Trump and sealed off our border. And you don't hear even a word of regret from the left. And we're certainly never going to hear an apology to the parents who have lost their kids to drugs. Diano, that would be enough to vote them all out of office and hold them accountable for their actions. But there's more. President Trump was asked when he was in office if he had seen evidence, just like you saw in the opening video, that COVID-19 came from a Wuhan lab leak. He said he did see such evidence. He boldly called it the Chinese virus because it came from China, as he said. But conservatives believed him. And we were called fringe. We were called conspiracy theorists, racist, and blocked from social media. But this week, Fox News reported that FBI Director Christopher Wray publicly confirmed that the FBI assessed that COVID virus for quite some time now. Now they knew, and they assessed the origins that it most likely came from the lab leak at Wuhan. They knew this for some time, and they hid it from the American people and the world. The U.S. Energy Department this week also said that the COVID-19 virus most likely came from the Chinese laboratory. Conservatives and President Trump were right, and millions died, and conservatives were banned from social media for speaking the truth. Some Chinese scientists are even saying that it was deliberate. And Tony Fauci and the NIH were sending American tax dollars to the Wuhan lab and never holding them accountable while gain-of-function research and experiments were going on. Diano, that would be enough to vote them all out of office and hold them legally accountable. But there's more. The National Review reported this week, and we are now learning that royalty payments were paid to Tony Fauci and the NIH and scientists. That's right, millions of dollars were paid by Big Pharma to the NIH and scientists. Now, how can they be the watchdog for the American people if they're getting paid by Big Pharma? It seems like a big conflict of interest. And the worst part is they're not even required by law to disclose their royalty payments. Who approved that law? Now, Diana, that would be enough to vote them all out of office and hold them legally accountable. But there's so much more than we can even get into today. Record crime, anti-Semitism, the abandonment of the Abraham Accords, mental illness, homelessness, open borders, inflation, shortages, high gas prices, billions of dollars funneling into Ukraine while our cities crumble. War, invasions. Iran now is on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon, an elevated risk of World War III, widespread poverty, a failing rail system with record train derailments, narrow misses at our airports, and a total loss of confidence in our election system and our government, and so much more. Dayenu, all of those things would be enough to vote them all out of office and hold them legally accountable. But there's so much more than we can even discuss today. Democrats stated over and over again when President Trump was in office that they wanted the truth, but the truth has never been a left-wing value. So I say to them and all who ignored the truth before and blamed those who spoke the truth, Jack Nicholson's line from the movie A Few Good Men: you want the truth, you want the truth, well, you can't handle the truth. Dayenu, wouldn't you think that would be enough? And now I would like to introduce, live from Franklin, Tennessee, JRA co-founder Mitch Silberman. Mitch?
Hello, JRA community. It's always so great when we are together. Wow, what a great speech from Bruce. Woof. So I may have shared with you a few years ago that I had a very civil discussion with a close family member, and I know she voted for Hillary. And I asked her this question. I think we were maybe 2 or 3 years into the Trump presidency. And I said, let's pretend Hillary was president right now. Sidebar, thank God she isn't, right? What a disaster that would have been. But back to that discussion. I said, what if Hillary was president now? And I told you we had the most robust economy the world's ever seen, non-existent inflation, energy independence, cheap gasoline, peace in the Middle East. And she actually stopped me and said it would be a great presidency. And I gave her this look. And she says, I just hate him so much. And I said, that's okay. I didn't ask you what you think of him. Do you like him? I just said, if Hillary was president and these things were going on, you yourself said, wow, what a great presidency. Well, now it's time to turn the tables. If you have people, well, of course you do. For those in your life that are center left that you know voted for Biden, I think you want to ask them this. Ask them, okay, let's say that Trump was president now. Again, sidebar. If you're watching this broadcast, you know that with every fiber of my being, I'm convinced Trump won in a landslide. But he's not in the Oval Office. We got to deal with reality. So ask your friend, if Trump was president right now, and we have, you can give him Bruce's list, my goodness. We had the abandonment in Afghanistan. We had $87 billion worth of war equipment left there for them, abandoning our own people and our allies. We have crushing inflation where people can't even afford to feed their families. We have out of control gas prices, unprecedented stock market volatility. If you have an IRA at 401k, you lost about 22% last year. We're inching to war with China. Apparently, we have unlimited money and unaccountable money that gets to go to Ukraine. In fact, how would you feel if President Trump promised to pay the pensions of another country's citizens rather than our own? Ask this of your friend and then say, why aren't you holding President Biden accountable? Would you be upset if this was under Trump? What would you say about the Trump presidency if what is happening right now is going on under a Trump presidency? What would you say? And ask them, why are you giving Biden a pass? Why is there a double standard? Now, part of it is, once again, President Trump is right. The fake news is the absolute enemy of the people. I mean, I'm astonished, but I guess I shouldn't be. When Trump was in office, everything was his fault. Even when things were going great, everything was his fault. And now while Biden's president, nothing is his fault. Nothing. It's amazing. So that could have an impact. Your friend may not know about the complete debacle of Afghanistan or, but you could talk to them about, this Chinese spy balloon, letting it meander all the way across our country. Your friends, they live in reality for the most part, right? They put gas in their tanks. They buy eggs at the store. So it goes back to that old Marx Brothers line, which is, who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes, right? So ask your friend. And the whole purpose is not to make them wrong, not to cause a fight. You want to have a civil discussion, but the point is to get them to question themselves, to get them to confront reality, because we have another presidential election next year. This matters more than ever. I sadly joke that every time we meet, we think things can't get worse, and then they do. So you have to have these conversations. Don't inundate them with 3 articles a day. No one likes them. Don't make them wrong. Don't create an enemy. Just make them think, make them question their assumptions, make them question themselves, force them to confront reality. And maybe they'll say, yeah, why would I be upset if this was under Trump, but I'm giving Biden a pass? You have to have these conversations. because now we have to fight and we have to have hope for the future. Now, as an investment advisor, I will tell you, hope is not an effective strategy, but we're talking about life, and you have to have hope in life. And I came across this great quote from a gentleman online named Gad Saad. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but he spells it G-A-D-S-A-A-D. I'm just going to read it to you, because we've got to have hope for the future. Hope is an elixir of life. It is the engine that propels us forward in the pursuit of countless goals, all of which might otherwise be impossible to undertake if we were bereft of hope. Thank you. Bruce, back to you.
Mitch, you said it so well. We all need hope. And one of the things that I think that JRA provides to our members and our listeners and all over the country is that we're communicating the truth and offering hope. So I'm so happy that you said that.
Yeah, it's crucial. It is, I have friends, and I'm sure you do too, Bruce, and our listeners do, that they said, I don't want to read the newspaper anymore. I don't want to follow the news. I'm so much happier. And I get it. I totally get it. As a JRA co-founder, Bruce and I kind of don't have that luxury, but I get it. It's a very dangerous, precarious times, but that's why we fight. That's why we must have hope. Our children are worth fighting for. Our future is worth fighting for. Our grandchildren. This country, the more I learn of this country and the country's history, I'm in awe of what we have inherited, and we need to pass it on.
I agree. And, I personally think that Joe Biden is just a tool of the left. And if it gets to the point where he is behind in the polls, they have no loyalty to him, they will abandon him. And there's glimmers of that are happening where these things are coming out, and it's a little too little, too late. Some of the things that I addressed in my opening remarks, this should have come out before the midterms. This stuff should have come out before the 2020 election. And the media buried the whole idea of the laptop and all the crime that was associated with that. And they knew, and now we know that the FBI knew that this came from the lab. They could have vindicated President Trump, but they didn't want to do it because they didn't want him to be reelected. Yeah,
and Bruce, you remind me of another point. Going back to my earlier, I've done this. It's actually effective. So I encourage you, I joke, if you have hard left people in your life, don't bother arguing with them. It's like I say, don't wrestle with a pig in the mud. You both get filthy, but the pig likes it. So if they're hard lefty, just let it go. You're not going to change their mind. But if you have people that are center left, that they voted for Biden, but they're not, they're reasonable, not only ask them what I said earlier about how would you rate Trump's presidency if all these things were going on under him, but you could also ask him, what if Donald Trump Jr. had a laptop showing him with pictures of, whores and cocaine, and from what I understand, child pornography, and funneling money to the big guy, i.e. his dad? How would you feel about that? How would the press feel about that? I mean, it's Donald Trump, I know people who hate his guts. I don't, but you have to admit his children are remarkable. Okay, so how do you think the media would have treated a scenario if it was a Donald Trump Jr. laptop, not a Hunter Biden laptop? Ask them that too.
Yeah, well, we already know how that would come out. But
again, you want to make them think.
Yes, I'm happy that we're having these glimmers of hope that are coming out with the FBI and the Department of Energy, and now even the Congress shutting down one of his bills this week. And then also the primary election in Chicago was a glimmer of hope, where the mayor of Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, was defeated. And what was interesting is that when she was defeated, she blamed her defeat that she was unfairly criticized because she's a Black woman, and then blamed shop owners for not properly locking their doors at night, and that's why there was crime. Now, that's an excellent example of left-wing thinking and instead of taking responsibility for what's going wrong in her own city, murders and shootings, everything on the rise, blaming it on race.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would love to. I mean, there's so few courageous reporters. I know Peter Doocy's one of them, but I would love to have been a reporter and say, so you lost because of your race. How did you win? Did you win because of your race? Like, logic escapes them. It's just mind boggling. And you know, Bruce, what you said about, I didn't hear that she said she blamed shopkeepers, but do you remember us being lectured by the Democratic Party when, God forbid, a woman got raped? If someone said, well, she shouldn't have been dressed like that, or she shouldn't have been teasing, or whatever it was, which of course is wrong, the left jumped all over anyone who would say, blame the victim. And here it is, a radical lefty blaming the victim. You got robbed, well, you should have locked your door. You know, it's just, it's mind boggling, but their hypocrisy knows no bounds.
Yeah, well, I don't know if she's going to be replaced with anyone better, but you know, when we were all locked down and no one could get haircuts, they shut down the whole industry. The hairdressers couldn't even work. A lot of them, I don't know what they did to get money. Maybe they got it from the government, or their businesses went out. She secretly went and got a haircut. And rather than saying like, oh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that, you're right. Well, I'm a public figure, I need a haircut. Meanwhile, we were all looking like SpongeBob with our hairs because we couldn't get, you know, we had people trying to cut our hair that didn't know what they were doing. And so, you know, because she's a public figure, had a haircut. It didn't look very good either way anyway, in my opinion.
Well, actually, you're reminding me, it feels so good to say this, but your governor, woohoo, y'all, your governor did the same thing with the French Laundry, right? Your Speaker of the House at the time from your state of California, I'm sorry, I'm having fun with this. She was also caught getting her hair done. And Dan Bongino pointed out something that's really true. I mentioned hypocrites, and they are hypocrites. But he takes it a step further. He says it's not hypocrisy, it's hierarchy. Meaning you peasants, you little people need to abide by these rules, not us. We are your betters. We know how to run things, and we need to look good. We're smarter. We can figure things out. So you peasants just know your place.
Well, he's the governor, but he's not my governor. And if anybody wants to see my speech when Larry Elder was running for governor, we hosted him at the Marriott in Woodland Hills. I was quite clear on my attacks for Governor Newsom, which is interesting you bring up the governor, because I was in a store in the last couple of weeks, a retail store, and talking with the manager, and she basically, this is a very well-known store. I don't need to say who it is because this is more than just their store. I'm hearing this all over the place, that people are literally walking into the retail establishment, grabbing what they want, and just walking out the door. And the employees are told you cannot do anything to stop them. And the police are not called because now there's some kind of law in California that if you steal under, I think it's $800 or $850, they don't prosecute you. And that's also what happened in Chicago. She's claiming that the crime went down. If you research it, they stopped prosecuting criminals. So if you release criminals into the environment, you're going to have more crime. And even Governor Newsom released like sex criminals, pedophiles and stuff in California. Like, what does he expect is supposed to happen with that?
Well, it's not just him. I mean, unfortunately, there's an evil genius at play, a true evil genius named George Soros that figured out a while ago, you know, one of the best ways I can disrupt society is to have corrupt DAs that won't prosecute bad guys. I mean, who would ever think of such a thing, but it works. I mean, it's evil, it's wrong, it's destructive, it's terrible, but it's effective. So that's going on in LA, Chicago, New York. I think Nike in Portland just sent a request asking for more police protection because they had to close the store down. And it's amazing. So let me get this straight, Nike. You probably were all for the BLM movement, right? Buying large mansions, if I think that's what it is. You're probably all for it, defunding the police. And now that there's repercussion, you want police back. I mean, it's just, this is their playbook, and it's outrageous. It really is.
Well, if you talk to your friends in the police force, and I often do, police morale is pretty low. Imagine going out there, risking your life to try to serve and protect, or protect and serve, and trying to stop criminals. You arrest them and they don't prosecute them. And if they're convicted, they're let out early. And you think, why am I risking my life for this money? Like, I would think there's a lot of early retirements and people leaving the police force, and very hard to get good people. I'm also hearing that police don't even want to arrest Black criminals because they're afraid that they're going to be called racist or do something wrong. So I don't think any of this should be judged by race. People should be judged by their actions, and that's it.
Well, I'm sorry to tell you that's considered a racist statement, my friend. At least in today's world. Hey, we're getting some great questions. Bruce, I want to take our first question. I want to tackle this one because it's a valid one. Leonard G says, how do you, in quotes, justify Trump's dinner with two anti-Semites? And I know that happened a few months ago, but I think it's a very valid question. Look, I'm a huge fan of President Trump. Doesn't mean that I look the other way when he makes mistakes. He's human. He makes mistakes. So just like when a president builds a cabinet, there's no way he personally knows 5,000 people to fill all these positions. He relies on his handlers. Whoever his handlers were really blew it. They really blew it. He probably, he knew who Kanye was. I don't know if Kanye had yet let out of all of his anti-Semitic remarks at that point. I don't know the timeline, but the other guy who I'd never heard of before apparently was a known anti-Semite. What should have happened, his handlers really to take the blame for this one. His handler should have said, Mr. West, you're on the list. Who's this? And he said the guy's name, whatever it was. They should have said, sorry, he's not on the list. That should have been the end of it right there. And again, he doesn't make many mistakes. I mean, yes, he's a bull in the china shop. Yes, he's a bully, but he has so many phenomenal things about the way he governed as president. But that was a mistake. And I also, I hate to say it, I don't like him attacking Ron DeSantis. I don't know who our nominee is going to be. I would love President Trump. I would love Ron DeSantis. There are people that I respect deeply that want one or the other. Unfortunately, they're going to have to duke it out and to get us our nominee. So, yeah, President Trump is making some unforced errors, which are unfortunate.
I am going to weigh in on that as well. One, from what President Trump said, was he met with Kanye because he knew Kanye and he thought Kanye was going in the wrong direction and he wanted to give him some advice. He
That's
did
right.
not know that the other person was coming. Maybe the handlers blew it, maybe they didn't. But I think that also is nuance. And let's get back to what's really important was he started the Abraham Accords. He was creating peace in the Middle East. He stopped funding Palestinians unless they said, we're going to renounce terror and recognize Israel. What's happened now is Joe Biden is now giving money back to the Palestinians without any preconditions, and it's now having an effect of terror in the Middle East. President Trump would back Israel right now if they decided to take out the nuclear weapons in Iran, and I guarantee you that Joe Biden would not support that. Jews and Israel were treated better under President Trump than any other president. And I think they pick at little things like you met with somebody, you spoke to somebody. Hell, we've had lunch with Democrats. Should we be in prison for that or blamed for that after all the things that I just listed that were at the hands of Democrats? I think we need to judge President Trump by his actions and not for this meeting. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and what I learned early on, prior to President Trump, I thought President Bush was a very pro-Israel president, and he probably was. Trump comes in, not only was he the most pro-Israel president in history, I put him up there with, Harry Truman, who recognized Israel, but he wasn't just pro-Israel, he was pro-Jew. This is a man who went to Shabbat dinner every Friday night with his Orthodox daughter, and Orthodox grandchildren, and Orthodox son-in-law. He was so pro-Judaism, not just pro-Israel. There's a distinction, but he was incredible on both counts. And in fact, I'm just going to pivot because there's a great question from Alan Kay on this topic. Many Jews wholeheartedly support the Dems. Jews tend to be libs. Fortunately, most are opposed to conservative points of view. It is an uphill battle. Can it ever change? Woof, that's a tough one. I don't know if any of you read the Jewish Journal. I still read it online. I didn't realize it was just a Los Angeles paper. But last week, I guess there was this incident where an Asian man had shot 2 Jewish men in the LA area. And there's a columnist for the Jewish Journal. I can barely tolerate reading him because he's so radical on the left. But basically, he was shaming the LA Times because they didn't come out as gun control is the answer. So yes, it's an uphill battle. If you read the Jewish Journal, they went apoplectic when Roe v. Wade was overturned. Can it ever change? Well, that's one of the reasons why Bruce and I founded the Jewish Republican Alliance. We are bringing people into our fold, whether they're Jews or non-Jews, but we have to fight. What's the alternative? Just to give up? We can't do that. There's too much at stake.
I agree, Mitch. And part of change comes from awareness. And I have to trust that eventually, if enough truth does come out, that people will be aware enough to make changes. But it's more than just a political war. It's also a cultural war. And unfortunately, our children are indoctrinated in public schools and afraid to speak out if they disagree. And adults are shamed if they have a different point of view or banned from social media. I wonder how many people even know that a few weeks ago, there were 2 shootings in the Pico Robertson area. There were Jews leaving temple, were shot in the middle of the day, Now you would think that would be major news. Maybe it got a little local exposure, but it really is evidence of such anti-Semitism that's gone on not only here, but around the country. And now I'm concerned more than anything else that a news report came out, and this changes everything. If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, Mitch, that changes everything. That we cannot allow happen. And I don't know if President Netanyahu has commented on this, but someone has to take some action because they have threatened to use it if they got one.
Well, listen, Iran has been threatening. It's shocking and so disappointing. Back to the earlier question about why do Jews keep voting Democrat? The Democratic Party is eager to give money to Iran. They're eager to bring them into the community of nations. They're eager to give money to the Palestinians. They're eager. I mean, I look at the headlines when Israel retaliates. It's look what the evil Israelis did to the poor little Palestinians. Like, oh yeah, the Palestinians bombed them first. I mean, the bias is incredible. And you're right, Bruce. It could be any day now that Israel is going to make a preemptive strike. One thing I know, Israel takes its security very seriously. They probably know that for the most part, the U.S. may no longer have Israel's back. You know, they're as you mentioned, funding money to the Palestinians. They're not using that to build bridges and plumbing and construction work. They're using that money to terrorize and kill more Jews. So it is, it is a tough thing. And then Moshe L talked about, he says, what are your thoughts on DeSantis as president and Trump acting as Secretary of State? It won't happen. President Trump listen, if you want to become president, you have to have a massive ego. President Trump has a huge ego, and that's okay. He would never, and for that matter, I can't imagine DeSantis ever putting his ego aside and running as President Trump running mate. So I don't think it's going to happen. I think we win with either DeSantis or Trump as president.
I agree with you. I think this is Trump's nomination if he wants it. I think that's what's going to happen. I want to move on to Ukraine, because there is so much money being poured into Ukraine right now. And we can argue whether it was justified or not for Russians to go in. And most people would say no. I don't think that the Ukrainians were free from corruptions either. But I heard retired Army Colonel Douglas McGregor talking about what's going on in Ukraine. Apparently, they are completely running out of people to man these weapons. They're now recruiting boys and old men and women into uniform, that they don't have the ability to even manage this. If it wasn't for NATO and the NATO technology and the men to manage this thing, they would quickly fall apart. That the NATO alliance is on the brink of falling apart. Germany is upset because they're not getting enough energy because their pipeline was blown up. By whom? We can talk about that another time. Turkey is ready to align with Asia, with China, with Russia. It's a very sad situation, and we're putting $48 billion, whatever the amount of money we put in there was, and then the people of Palestine, Ohio, have a train derailment. Our trains can't run. Our cities are in ruin, and our American people are being abandoned. And Mitch, that really concerns me. What say you?
Well, yeah, it's a complex thing because at first, I remember Bruce and we had a JRA meeting with a donor. It was very early on in the Ukraine conflict. And I don't know if you guys remember, but early on, Joe Biden, there's no end to his stupidity and cowardice and corruption. But when it first began, what does he say to the leader of Ukraine? First thing out of his mouth is, "Do you need a ride? You know, we'll whisk you out of there." You know, that's what cowards do. And Zelensky famously said, "I don't need a ride. I need weapons, or I need bullets, or I need ammo." So Bruce and I early on were like, "Wow, what a stud." And then we start realizing something's not right here. Something is not right. And someone put it really well that we have a bigger corrupt country just invaded a smaller corrupt country. So, and then we have people on our side, whether it's Mark Levin or Dennis Prager or Tucker Carlson, who don't agree what to do here. You know, you have on our side, people say you got to support him no matter what. And you have people on our side saying, like what Bruce said, which is, wait a minute, we have a toxic explosion in East Palestine and they get bupkis. We have crumbling infrastructure, they get bupkis. Our president goes on and says, "Hey, Ukraine, we're going to pay your pensions." I almost lost it there. So this is a complex situation, but what really bothers me is this concept of Ukraine gets two things: unlimited money and no accountability. Are you telling me with $100 billion going out the door like that, there's no corruption? And by the way, there's very few people on the planet without a phone. Where are all the videos? I don't see the videos. I mean, I know there's a war. I'm not implying there's not really a war going on, but something is amiss when Biden can show up and they can walk in the middle of the street, and this guy can appear in award shows and do interviews. Like, where's all the video of all the war going on? Like, we hear about it. We see some destroyed buildings and destroyed vehicles, but something is very wrong here.
Well, according to President Trump, there's more people dying in the attack than are even being publicized. It's a very brutal war right now. And he came out and said he could negotiate a peace settlement in 24 hours.
He probably could.
That ended. But, you know, I think he would negotiate a peace settlement faster than Joe Biden would be able to tumble off the stairs of Air Force One. He'd probably be able to have the peace settlement already negotiated and all the boys home.
Bruce, before you move on, you just said peace settlement, Trump negotiating. Have you ever heard Biden or anyone from his corrupt administration even talking about peace?
They don't want peace.
I've never heard them even mention peace.
Yeah.
And then Zelensky has the nerve the other day that says we Americans, we are going to have to send our children to die for his country.
Well, I know this may be sinister for me to believe this, but we all know that there was a lot of corruption in Ukraine. And the first Trump impeachment was because he wanted them to disclose all the corruptions that Biden and his family took out and the money that he took out of Ukraine. So they got the goods on him. So can you imagine if he doesn't? It's almost like he's paying a ransom with our tax dollars. So I'm concerned that if he didn't do that, that they would disclose all the things that happened under that corrupt system before he was president.
Well, I have no doubt that here's another question to ask one of your friends, okay? Because someone put that in. What on earth would you do any differently if your goal was to destroy America? And then what do you mean? You say, well, let's see, we'd have open borders, we'd have cartels smuggling in drugs and sex traffickers. Let's see, we would give away hundreds of billions of dollars without any questions asked. We would abandon I mean, you go through the list and say, I'm asking you, if your goal is to destroy America, what would you do any differently than this administration is doing? But there's a caveat there. I was with a family member about a month and a half ago, and somehow this came up. And she literally said to me, we were talking about the evils of, you know, child pornography and child trafficking and all these terrible things. And she looked at me and said, well, you know, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. I almost fell out of my chair. So my point, what I'm making is, if you're on this broadcast, you're extremely well informed. Don't assume that anyone you have a conversation with is as informed as you are. You may have to educate them. But these are very dangerous, precarious times. And you're right, there's probably rampant, there was rampant corruption even before Biden took over, but that's probably why they were paying Hunter Biden 80 grand a month or whatever it was.
You know, it is. And I think, you know, it extends very deep into the Biden family. And I think eventually that's going to come out. I'm not sure he's going to be the nominee in 2024. If this starts coming out, they'll turn on him so fast. And I think there's a part of them that thinks he should not be running. Have you walked into any major city downtown lately, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it's Chicago, whether it's Memphis, whether it's whatever? If you Washington, D.C., you can't walk without being chased by what I always call it the so-called homeless people. And I feel really bad because they're more than just homeless. They're drug addicted. They have mental illness. They're spreading disease like not ever before. They're being forced to go into hotels, or being forced to take them in along with illegal aliens, and hotels are being destroyed. These people are being ignored, and it's called homelessness, and they'll say, oh, it's homelessness. But how can we let our country be like that, where it's now acceptable that you cannot walk the streets anymore?
Well, I will tell you, when we were Angelinos, we did a ride-along in the Rampart district, and it was very informative. It was cool. They let me carry, so that was good. I asked for, can I carry? I'm a big Second Amendment guy, and they said, sure, and said, show me what you're carrying. It was really cool. But here's what I learned. They don't want to solve the homelessness problem because there's so much money in it. And my first thought was like, what? What do you mean there's money in it? Well, certainly no money in it for the homeless people. By the way, Bruce, they're not homeless people. They're people experiencing homelessness. So no more bigoted comments like that. But anyway, so what we were told is that the corruption and the money involved with the homeless industry is huge, because they say, well, we need money. We need, $100 million to help the homeless. Well, who doesn't want to help the homeless? Well, who gets the contract? Okay, so I get the contract for $100 million. And then I pay my buddy Bruce, who's on the city council, $10 million in a kickback. And then I hire Bruce's children to do this, that, and the other. But nonetheless, my point is they don't want to solve it. It's only gotten worse, which is why I was so profoundly disappointed that the people of LA, well, I think Rick Caruso probably won. I don't know for sure, but they needed time to count all the votes they needed to get her in. She's not going to make it in. She's going to make it worse, the homeless problem there in LA. Karen Bass.
And the people who are listening today are saying, we're, like you said, they're very informed people, and hopefully we've been enlightened on some other things that they didn't know. But, their concern is, your message of hope in the beginning, Mitch, was, where's the hope? How do I maintain hope? And part of it, the hope comes from the fact that in the past, we felt we would go to the polls on election day and vote for the person that we thought would represent our interests. Win, lose, or draw, we thought it was a fair election, and people went on that day to vote. Now you have unsolicited mail-in ballots. I know I've been saying this on every show, but I'm going to say it again. Ballot harvesting and early voting, no signature verification or ID. You have someone like, the symptom is a Fetterman that had no business being elected to the Senate. He had all kinds of issues. He failed the debate, but there was so much early voting that they had already voted for, the person who was wearing the uniform with the big D on it. So I think that is a fundamental thing that needs to change. And until that changes, how was the 2022 midterm election even close? Tell me, with all this stuff going on, something doesn't make sense.
Well, there's a lot that doesn't make sense. But to your point, Bruce, look, I've always been very patriotic, and I'm sure all of our watchers are as well, our viewers are. When is election day? It's that Tuesday. We're going to show up. We're going to vote. Here in the Nashville area, I waited online for an hour to vote. It was fantastic. And they asked for my ID. And when I told them in California, if you ask for my ID that's racist, they thought I was joking. And I said, I'm not joking. So, but here's to your point. Look, everyone on this call probably knows we show up our patriotic duty, we vote that day, we get the sticker, and it's great. But the game has changed. The game has changed. We are so steadfast to do it the way we've always done it and the way it should be done, by the way. That we all agree on. But we're missing out on 2/3. We're missing out on early voting, ballot harvesting, right? And we're missing out on, as Bruce calls it, vote, cheat by mail. So it's like the analogy would be this. Okay, I'll just use football. Once upon a time, football was purely I'm the quarterback and I run with the ball, or I'm the quarterback and I hand the ball to the running back and he runs with the ball. I don't know what decade it was where someone said we're going to start doing a forward pass. And at first it was poo-pooed, like, if you live by the pass, you die by the pass. You're not going to win if all you do is run the ball. We are not going to win if we say we're going to stick to our principles and we're going to vote on voting day, while the other side is mailing in votes early, ballot harvesting, and mail and doing it all by mail or doing it early. You name it, all the different ways they are doing it. We have one tool. They have 3 or 4. We're going to lose. We're going to keep losing.
Well, unfortunately, people on the right, conservatives, do not trust the mail-in ballot procedure.
With reason.
They feel like their votes are not going to count. Whether it's true or not, we don't know. But I think that's part of the problem. And I think almost in protest, conservatives will say, I'm not going along with this early voting. I'm not voting by mail. Show me a ballot box. I want to press a lever. I want you to check my ID. That's what I want. And it's almost like an act of protest that they show up on that day. Like they are refusing to, for the most part, vote early.
And yet we lose.
The Democrats vote early and they vote often.
Early and often. We have a great question from Barbara L. She says, what do you think about Speaker McCarthy giving the documents and videos of January 6th to Fox News? Well, on one hand, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, Bruce, too. On one hand, not everyone watches Fox News. Not everyone watches Tucker Carlson. And this shouldn't be a media thing. It should be a congressional thing. So I don't know if it was Weasley on his part, cunning on his part, but it should have been, we're going to do, let me go further. It should be a congressional thing and giving it to Tucker Carlson. But I have to say one more thing before I pass it off to you, Bruce, because I want to hear what you think about what McCarthy did with Tucker Carlson and J6. I'm glad they're having hearings, but is it just grandstanding? A few weeks ago, they were excoriating people about Pfizer or this or that, but who's being prosecuted? Who's going to jail? Who's suffering? Is it just, oh, well, I told him, not enough?
Okay, so I have no problem with him giving it to Fox News. I would hope that if other news, and I think they are now asking for the video, that they be entitled to it. But it's a little bit funny. Like, where were all these people doing cartwheels and standing on Main Street in front of the Capitol building? Where were all these reporters that said, we demand to see the footage? Like, where were they before the midterms? Where were they before the 2020 election? Where were they? Where were they when they could have played the Tony Bobolinsky interview that was Joe Biden's business partner that Tucker interviewed? Even Fox News didn't play that. They only played it on Tucker. So where were these people when they had the opportunity? Where were these people when they were looking at President Trump during the White House and calling him a traitor and every possible name? Now suddenly it's out and they want equal access. Good, give them equal access. But they really violated their duty as journalists to not make a bigger deal.
Well, they're not even journalists. They are just a wing of the Democratic Party, or the Democratic Party is a wing of the media. They have no interest in the truth. All they want is to promote their agenda, further their agenda, make sure everything sticks with the narrative. I'm particular. I mean, I would say they were particularly derelict about the whole COVID thing, but about everything. They've been completely derelict about anything that would hurt their team from winning.
Well, COVID, you brought that up. We'll bring it up again. I mean, they force people to have vaccines. They force people to wear masks. They idolized the first responders, but if they didn't want to take a vaccine, they fired them. If
Right.
you were a doctor and you disagreed with the narrative, you were fired. And they said, if you take the vaccine, you won't be able to spread it to other people. Well, that turned out to not be true. And we can go back and forth about all the things that they said that weren't true. But the issue is, if they didn't know, and they knew they didn't know for sure, and all these research scientists were determining what is fact and what isn't, how could you possibly blame people who didn't really know what to do? People were struggling, and they had to listen to their government, and their government didn't know, but they pretended like they did.
Yeah, and I stopped watching Saturday Night Live decades ago because it used to be funny, and now it's just it's hate stuff. But the last Saturday night, I believe Woody Harrelson gave this monologue, and I don't know if you all saw it. It's worth it. It's about 6 minutes long. It's kind of funny, and the audience is into it. They're chuckling, they're clapping hands with him. They're, it's a nice experience. And then at the very end, he said, yeah, I was given this script to read, and the script goes something like this, that the big drunk companies bought up all the politicians and all the media. They forced everyone into their home, and the only way you could come out of the home is if not only you took their drug, but you had to take it over and over again. He goes, gee, who would ever think of a crazy idea like that? And the audience was silent. They were like, he worded it better than I'm giving it to you. But the audience went from clapping seals to, what did he just say? And I don't think Woody Harrelson is a conservative by any stretch.
I saw that.
But
I saw that.
this is a massive crime against humanity, what they did. And once again, who's going to be accountable?
I was lucky to have a very small breakfast invitation with Senator Steve Daines from Montana last week. And it was in Los Angeles, and there was probably 10 people, at the breakfast table. And he's a big supporter of Jews in Israel, because I mentioned anti-Semitism to him, and he is an avid supporter of Israel and Jews, and a great senator from Montana. But one of the things I said to him was, because he's involved in getting Republicans elected to the Senate, that's what he's doing. But it's not enough, and he agreed that conservatives just criticized Joe Biden and the left. It's not enough just to blame the media as being an arm of the Democrat Party. Republicans must articulate an alternative vision that differs from the left and set forth a course that it's going forward to fix the problems that plague our nation and our country. I think that is something that, even if it's not able to be put into law, it needs to be put out there into the atmosphere so people know where conservatives stand. Because after a while, it'll just be pointing fingers and it won't amount to anything. And I'm all for these hearings, because you got to expose what these people did, but you also got to do the right thing and say, here's what we would do differently. Yeah, there's no doubt. Bruce, I'm gonna bounce this question over to you, because I think it's the kind of question you love. We have a great question from Alan K. It says, what is the JRA doing to help us make a difference? Alan, thank you for asking that. I have my thoughts, but I'm going to send it over to Bruce, because he's a visionary and likes to answer these kinds of questions. Well, how do we make a difference? Well, in numerous ways. I think what a lot of people have felt in the past is they've really felt alone. They felt like their voice didn't matter, that no one was speaking for them. They had no place. If you were a Jewish Republican, you really had no place to gather. And we're going to bring back local meetings. The pandemic is over, and we're going to start scheduling that again, along with our digital access. But to make a difference, you have to be informed, and you have to feel like what you believe is correct. And a lot of people, when you're not around others who share your views and your ideas, start to question, is what I'm saying really right? How come everybody is against me? And how come the media is against me? And we provide opportunities for people to unite and energize and support America and support Israel and to gather and to bring speakers. We also formed JRA Nation, which is a C4. A 501c3 is what Jewish Republican Alliance is. So all your donations are tax deductible. But the C4 JRA Nation allows us to get involved with electioneering, although only 49% of our budget, but it allowed us to do that. I mean, we made a gallant effort to try to help Larry Elder get elected in California. Unfortunately, we failed in that effort, but we have supported a lot of candidates, and our job is to continue to do so. In order for us to really make a difference and to be a digital monster across the country, and to also be a community-based organization and do all the things that we want to do by taking missions to Israel and to Washington, D.C., and all the great work that we want to continue, we need dollars. And that's really what Mitch and I are doing right now, is trying to raise the dollars that will allow us to have the most influence and impact that we possibly can.
Well said. Somebody asked me what it's like living in Tennessee. I'm going to piggyback that with what Bruce just said. I don't want to change the topic. I was privileged. The Daily Wire is out here. So I went and got a tour. I met with the CEO. It's a really amazing organization. I also reached out to our state. In fact, just to brag a little bit, sorry, but apparently Tennessee has not elected a statewide Democrat since 2006. So I reached out to both of our senators, and I met with Senator Marsha Blackburn. And she's all that. She's wonderful. She's delightful. She lives in the same city I live in. And she wanted to know about the Jewish Republican Alliance. And I told her, I said, you're meeting with a unicorn. You're meeting with a Jewish Republican from California. So when Bruce and I founded it 7 years ago this month, we didn't know. We just said, are we all alone? It was very lonely, because I know in California, you feel like you have to keep your mouth shut. If you could raise your hand, I can't see it, but probably all of you have had vile things said to you by someone you know or even don't know when they find out you're a Republican. Being here in Tennessee, it's a very safe assumption that everyone you're speaking with is a conservative. Now, it's not true. Not everyone is a conservative, but the difference is, number one, it's a safe assumption because we have shared values here. Number two, there are Democrats and liberals here, but number three, they know they're in the minority. And they also know that we're going to treat them with dignity. It doesn't go that way in LA or New York. So it's really great being here. But to Bruce's point, I'm so excited to build a JRA presence here in the Nashville area. There are so many Republicans here, Jews and non-Jews, and it's a great opportunity to expand our footprint all that much faster, because we do have to make a difference. We are doing a lot behind the scenes that you don't see, whether it's fundraising or reaching out to candidates, planning community events like what before the lockdowns. So there's a lot going on, but here's the thing. It takes dream work to make the team work. Your involvement is crucial, whether you write checks, you volunteer, you help fundraise, whatever it is. This has grown so much bigger than we ever thought, which is wonderful. But now we have to build out the infrastructure to really have huge impact.
That's very true, Mitch. And he used to say at our local meetings, there's more hugs than handshakes, which was very true. And then if you go to our big events, you really are changed forever when you stand and with 1,200 other Republicans, and not just Jewish Republicans, we have great support from the Christian community as well. When you were there and there's 1,200 people on their feet cheering and screaming and energized and excited, and you have great speakers, and we put on amazing events. When you're there, you can't help but be inspired and motivated to fight on.
Yeah, and fight on we must. As you all know, with Dennis Prager, that was our last big event. He's famous for saying a lot of things. One of them, of course, is you either are a fighter, you support fighters, or you do nothing. So anything you do helps. Anything you do counts. Whether you're involved with the JRA or you're involved with so many other great organizations, we're all on the same side fighting for the same thing. helping to preserve the Judeo-Christian values upon which our beloved country was founded. It's go time. Now is the time for everyone to get involved. And in fact, Bruce, I'm sure you'll announce who our next speaker is going to be on a week and a half from now.
Go ahead, Mitch.
Well, many of you probably have seen Heather McDonald. I love her. I love her when she's on Tucker, when she's on Hannity, when she's on Prager. Anyway, she's going to be our guest speaker. An invitation will go out shortly. It's going to be online Monday, March 13th at noon Pacific time. And she's got a great new book coming out called Racism Merits Trump. No, Racism Trumps Merit. Sorry, I got a little backwards. Had a dyslexic moment. But anyway, she's going to be our guest speaker March 13th. Put that on your calendar. That's another opportunity for us to get together and hear from a leading conservative thinker.
Well, on that note, we want to thank you all for joining us today for this great discussion. The hour went by so quickly, and I know we covered a lot of issues, but feel free to email us or question us at any time. Get involved, make a difference, and help us achieve the goals that we want to be completed this year. We're intent on working hard for you and for our country, and we will be fighting on. So until we meet again, thank you all for being here. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.